Welcome back, everybody. It's Rodrigo Fondor with another episode of Asheville Real Estate News. Today, as our whole theme is for the month of July, we're talking about, personal responsibility or how to position yourself individually to move forward, to adapt to change, and just be prepared for the unprepared. And so today we're talking with Jared Bellmund. He's an insurance agent with All Choice Insurance. He's the host of his own podcast called The Jared Bellmund Show. And today we talk about all things insurance, talk a little bit about how to think about insurance, what questions you should ask, why insurance is important. And we have a little bit of a deep dive mostly on like landlord-tenant relations and insurance and why those are important. Found it was a really helpful look at why having good questions when it comes to insurance is important to make sure you have coverage that is appropriate to the variables that you might have to deal with. So hope you all enjoy it. As always, please share it with a friend. Leave us a review. It really means the world to us. And see you guys on the next show. Take care. Well, welcome to the show, Jared.
Thanks for having me, Rodrigo. It's good to be back.
Yeah, it's you're like one of our most repeated guests,
that's great.
I think it's partially, obviously, I enjoy talking to you, but it's also the topic that you cover, which is the insurance side of things, is kind of like a fundamental. I always overinsure a little bit, for for better for worse, but so. I don't know if I've told you this, back in the day, I just started working personal injury as a legal assistant. And so I saw like all these cases of people who's just like totally not their fault. Something bad happens to them. They have really like low grade, crappy, bare minimum insurance. And then they're stuck paying out of pocket or just having these huge issues that are almost like impossible to overcome. I was like, man, I don't ever want to be in those in that position. So
yeah, understanding the story of what really happens is a lot different than looking at the premium and the policy.
Just like the practicality. Yeah.
The story sells more than anything for me.
Yeah. So that's what I want to talk about a little bit today is, this whole month we're talking a little bit about, if shifting times. I think that earlier in the spring it was a little hard to know what was going on, and now there's a little bit more of context, so there's a better feel for it.
I think so.
And just talking about how do you position yourself to move forward? And if we have crazy times again, how do you make sure you're set up well so it's not as unsettling? I think having good insurance, I've been in a car accident, for instance. If you have good insurance and you trust it, I think it's you don't have these concerns that other people might have if they don't know their insurance. And so I think having good insurance gives you that peace of mind in some ways. Or how do you see it play out with your clients and stuff?
Yeah, it's a mix of risk and reward.
Yeah.
And also there's an education piece to that. So having an advisor that explains the what ifs to you, and having someone that you can ask the what ifs to. The worst thing we see is someone that comes to us and is like, well, I've had this coverage for the last 10 years. And I'm like, you've had state mins on your auto insurance for the last 10 years? Like, if something would have happened, there would have been serious repercussions.
This would not have been enough,
yeah. No way. And in business, too. Sometimes it's, I started my business 3 years ago. I didn't know. I just was told this is what I need, so I got what I had to have. Or my landlord said I needed this coverage because I'm leasing this place, so I put that on. We get that with renters.
Yeah.
They call all the time saying, I need a $100,000 renter policy. Well, I see quotes that come in, they're like, yeah, they said it was like $300-$400. And I'm like, what? How's a renter's policy $300-$400? And it's $100,000 of contents coverage. Yeah. And I'm like, no, you just need $100,000 required for liability. But I would recommend you pay a little more for your liability, that $3 more a year to double that, triple that. And then let's talk what contents are.
Yeah, I think that that conversation, that extra $3 and what it really means, it's hard to wrap your head around until you've had or seen an experience for it, right? Because it is one of those things that you never deal with it. Like some people, it can be years before you ever have to actually deal with insurance, and
or never, hopefully, right?
Or never, right? But then something happens, and then you're like, oh my goodness, this sucks. Like I was not ready for this. So how do you think? Or what needs to happen for that gap in just acknowledging how big of a deal it is to have good, like, how do you go from, I just don't care as long as I'm covered, I'm good.
Yeah, you just give me a call and I'll
versus,
that's
why is it so hidden though, right? Like, because
it's not hidden because it's a product being sold. And so the commodification over the last decade of insurance is the worst thing for our industry. So you think of the commercials you see. Save you 15%, quick, right? Time. That's not what our product is. It's not quick time money. It's what happens when the worst thing that could ever happen to you in your life or business happens. Who's going to be standing next to you? And who's going to have those answers when nothing's going to happen? And so if you eliminate the product from it and start talking about what the real need is. So the need is you have assets that you need to protect. And so how do you protect those? And then understanding things like deductibles. So I have people all the time, I just want to save money. Just increase my deductible. Well, do you have that in the bank account? Like if something did happen a year from now, would that then cause you strain? So then why are you paying an extra? You're saving $100 so that if it happens in a year, you're spending $1,500 more on a deductible. Understand that, and some people are like, no, I got it. I want the higher deductible because I'll take on that risk. Or, we talk a lot about actual cash value versus replacement costs. Understanding the difference of those two things allows you to make a business decision on how to move forward and what you're responsible for if something does happen. Well,
let's dive into that a little bit because I think the actual cash value versus replacement value, at least on the real estate side of things, has a lot of weight on how things play themselves out. And I know we've talked about it, but first let's start with an explanation, like a definition of each, and then maybe if you can give an example of A and B situations where one might be more favorable than the other.
Yeah. So simply put, replacement cost is getting back what you had. So if you put replacement cost on a home, they will rebuild it as it was for the value that you insured it for. There's a lot of details in that. Some carriers will go guaranteed replacement cost where no matter what, you're getting it back. Some will put a dollar amount on it where you have up to that dollar amount, or 25 or 50% if you put an endorsement. So there's all kinds of things that go into it, but they replace the home. Actual cash value is the value of the home minus the depreciation. So your home depreciates over time. Even though it gains in value and market value, it depreciates in building materials. So you don't want to have your primary residence being actual cash value because the lumber is slowly going to depreciate in value. You don't want them to replace the value of the lumber. You want them to replace the structure. But then we talk about it with mobile homes. So where a mobile home seriously depreciates over time, it also hits a point of non-return where the cost of paying for the replacement cost on a 25-year-old mobile home is not going to be worth what you're going to get for it. And mobile homes are always a little more, you see that actual cash value replacement cost battle there a little more because it's sometimes an investment property, so I just want the money I have in it back out, where that actual cash value could cover your investment and not necessarily the structure. And mobile homes have that issue because a small kitchen fire could cause a total loss. So kind of like getting in a minor accident. You're like, how did they total my whole car? It's because your car is actual cash value. It's depreciated value. So understanding the difference of that and understanding how you want to be. So if you're driving a car and you're like, man, I just want this replaced if I'm in an accident, you want replacement costs. You're not going to get it. But that's what it would be. Instead, you're going to get the cash value of whatever
the car is worth in that
moment.
Yeah, and I think like having the time to understand that, and if you're in real estate, real estate specific podcasts, it's going to be about like when you're looking at your properties, are you making that decision? Like what is it and why is it more important? And being, it's important to know to ask those questions, right?
Yeah, and you understanding what risk you're trying to mitigate, because if you're protecting your tenants, right? If you're a landlord and you're trying to protect your tenants having a place to live, you want replacement costs because you want to continue that tenant paying that rent in that place. If you're just trying to protect the investment, then actual cash value may cover that. And that's just a business decision you need to make.
So as we talk about a lot, knowing your numbers, it can go a long way in helping make those decisions. Well, let's take a step back. somebody comes to you and they're like, hey, I know I need to get insurance. I have some real estate. I dabble. I got a car, I got a house, etc. Like, how do I start and what's more important? How do you set yourself up from an insurance standpoint, like A to Z in theory? And what questions do you ask and what policies do you get in what order to protect yourself as best as possible? Obviously, there's a million variables there, but just as much as theory you can get us.
So just like you would talk about with an attorney or a CPA, how you structure your entities is going to depend on how we can insure you.
As an individual.
So
no entities.
So no entities?
Yeah. So I think that simplifies it a little
that simplifies
bit, right?
it. So our first conversation would be to look at your personal insurance and see how you're protected, because you want to protect your personal assets above everything else.
Right.
That's number one.
Mm-hmm.
You'd be amazed at the amount of investors I talk to that don't have an umbrella over their own personal stuff when they're doing, and then they have properties in their name. And if something happens in that property, they're going to come after their personal assets, that home, that mortgage, that future earned income.
Right.
You want to separate that. So that's the conversations you need to have with not only an attorney and a CPA, but with your insurance agent of how do you mitigate that risk of your personal line stuff, and how do you have the correct coverage? Because you can't have an umbrella without a minimum required coverage on your home and auto policies. Right. So you may need to bump up coverage to protect your overall assets that way.
I remember when I was working for an attorney as a legal assistant, we always looked at insurance almost like dominoes, right? Try to knock one down. If you can totally get everything you can out of that policy, then what's the next domino behind it? And you kind of keep that track record and you keep going. And eventually, there's no policy and the claim's large enough, then you get to the individual and you get whatever they have. Again, if the claim's large enough. Is that a fair way to look at it, or from an insurance side, would you look at it a different way? From that side of the table.
Yeah, so we look at how can we stop the attorney from going after anything more, right? How do you protect the specific entities? So a lot of the initial conversation, like you wanted to start with personal lines, I want to separate it. So the first conversation a lot of times is, okay, you own these one or two properties that you just bought in your name. Maybe it's time to set up an entity and separate them to protect and mitigate the risk between the two. So if there's a loss on the business side of things, they don't come after.
Yeah, and vice versa then at that point, right?
Right, and then if there's a loss on your personal stuff, like a car accident, they don't come after your business.
Yeah. What about life insurance? I know that that's something that there's so many different opinions on what type of insurance, why, which one's more important. And maybe it's not easy to say, hey, this is what you should do, but like maybe what are the questions you should ask, and when, how early or how old, how young, et cetera, should you be looking at it?
Yeah, as young and as healthy as you can. That's usually those are the two things that increase your buying value.
Right.
Again, you go to what are you trying to protect? Mm-hmm. And so from a personal standpoint, do you have a mortgage you need to protect? Mm-hmm. I mean, I try to offer mortgage protection is what we call it. Mm-hmm. The bank has a similar thing that they call mortgage protection, which is not really the same mortgage protection I'm looking at. I'm looking at if you as a breadwinner die, can your spouse continue to make those mortgage payments? Right. Can she just go ahead and pay off the home because you've taken out this life insurance policy? That's mortgage protection for me. Mm-hmm. The bank's mortgage protection is how do we retain this house or continue to be paid the mortgage payments and interest that the contract says. I'm more worried about your quality of life, right? Like I want to protect that quality of life. I don't want there to be a death and that cause a change in quality of life. From a business standpoint, if you have a partner, you may want to work out a buy-sell agreement between the two so that if one partner dies, the other partner one may not have to deal with the spouse that may inherit that business, or children that inherit that business and don't want to be part of it.
Have all of those decisions pre-made, because then it's just a matter of going through the process versus making decisions, which is probably a nice thing to not be dealing with a major loss and having to make major decisions at the same time.
Yeah, when you're grieving, it's a lot easier to have the money to make whatever decision you want than to have to worry about, can I make the decision if I don't have the money? I can't even
grieve because...
Right.
Yeah, that's definitely not a situation anybody wants to be in. How do you get people to move forward in this conversation, right? Because, again, going back to the very beginning of this, and insurance, unless you've experienced it, at least I know before, I was like, who cares? Like, I'll be fine, figure it out. Like, it's not, like, the chances of it happening are so low. When do you see people shift on that and being like, okay, it's time to have a more serious conversation about this?
So let's talk about you.
Yeah.
It was when you got married and had a kid, right?
With the life insurance?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the major initial push. I tried to do it earlier, honestly.
So you had something to protect.
Yeah.
So it made it urgent.
It did. That was definitely when the urgency was like, okay, we have to figure it out right away.
You buy a house, it's now urgent that you understand what that is, right? If you're a renter and you drive a 97 Buick, your asset is not something you necessarily want to protect, right? Like, hey, I lose it, I buy another one.
Right.
Maybe I have some personal property in my as a tenant, but if I lose it, no big deal. When you start growing a bank account, when you get your first career job and you want to protect, a lot of the young individuals I talk to, I feel like really old. The younger, just getting out of college, just starting a career, it's protect your long-term asset, which is your earning ability, right? You would hate to get into a car accident with state minimums and then have them come after future earned innings.
That would be terrible.
Future earned income is not something a 26-year-old wants to protect. That's millions and millions of dollars that they're going to come after because you have that ability to earn that income. Yeah. So every stage of life has another thing to protect.
Yeah, as you climb up the ladder, I guess you need to have a little bit more protection in case you fall so it hurts less. It's kind of what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
I know one of the things that we started doing as much as possible, like after one of our first conversations, was in getting our tenants to take rental insurance or renter's insurance, but more to protect ourselves as, property owners and property management. Can you just... I know we have a whole episode on that, so I don't want to deep dive.
That's okay.
I think that's a really good example of trying to create these layers, and maybe you can talk about that in case anybody doesn't require their tenants to get tenant or renter's insurance, and as an example of why to think of these things.
Yeah, as a landlord, that should be one of the main conversations you have. I believe it's in the North Carolina basic contract.
Yeah, but you have to initial one way or the other.
So, but going above and beyond initially one way or another, having that conversation about what you insure and what you don't insure, and letting them know that there are products available at a very cheap rate for them to insure the things you don't insure is probably the most important initial conversation you could have to protect yourself in the long term.
Right.
If their whole house burns down, and I'm saying their house is a tenant, you're going to be right? Because you're
property insurance.
You're going to get your insurance back. If they don't take out a tenant policy, all their personal property, their pots, their pans, their electronics, their clothes. Yeah. If they have kids that had shoes and socks and backpacks, they're not be able to go to school on Monday. Yeah. I mean, there are serious things that, as a tenant, you need to
have.
And as a landlord, you need to show that you care enough, in my opinion, that principle needs to be there, that you show them that you want to protect them or give them the choice to protect themselves.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's part of that is if you know as a landlord, then that's part of delivering like a good product or service to who your clients are, who are your tenants, and be like, hey, like this is why you need this. This is really important. We haven't even gotten all of our tenant base yet on it, because as they cycle through, then you can kind of push it. But it's definitely you made me a believer out of that initial conversation.
Yeah. And that's not even talking about the liability part, where they're inviting people into your home, and you may not necessarily be liable for that. But if they have zero insurance, an attorney's going to look for
they're
what's
next. They're going to come knocking.
Yeah, and you don't want to have zero barrier between an attorney, your tenant, an attorney that has someone that had property or bodily injury damage, and you and your business. That extra buffer is highly beneficial to your business.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the difference between going through somebody like you who's an agent versus going directly to an insurance company? And obviously you're biased.
Without a doubt,
I think totally okay, so, but I think one way or the other, I mean, obviously people can get great products and great service either way. It's just, I think it's a matter of like how you get there, right? What are you choosing? And I guess what's the distinguishing factor, right?
So my value is not in the product I sell, but in the service I provide. Where a carrier, their value has to be in the product they sell.
Right.
That's their responsibility. I think as having, even if you go, so I'm an independent agent,
right,
which means I have access to multiple carriers. Even if you go with a captive carrier, which only has one.
Is that like a State Farm?
Like a State Farm Bureau,
something
yeah.
like that, okay.
Yeah, we're coming up on nationwide going independent, so it's exciting times.
What does that mean?
So they're able to open up to other carriers, and they've been on a process to get there.
Oh, okay.
So thousands and thousands of what were captive are now going to be independent.
Interesting.
So we like to show our support of the independents. So we're excited. We're excited for those nationwide agents. Whether you're captive or independent, having a specific person, an agent, gives you somebody to have as an advisor and an educator up front, and an advocate and a protector when a claim does happen.
So when a claim does happen, what is your role then as an agent?
So it's a difficult place for me to put myself, because at that point I should have already earned I should have already put the value in place, right? Like at that point my mistakes are shown.
Yeah.
I should have you protected in the way that you need to be protected. But things happen. Hey, they need more pictures. The adjuster needs this. The adjuster needs that. I have relationships with adjusters. I know how different adjusters for different carriers, how they operate. I know what carriers use private adjusters.
Right.
And that's become a big thing in the last 5 years, is that carriers aren't using their own adjusters. They're going through private companies. And those private companies operate different than the carriers,
right,
because they're trained different, and the way they make money is different, right? So you have to know that. I'm your advocate. I'm in your corner. I have responsibilities to the carrier. I have responsibilities to ethics and morals.
Yeah.
But I also have responsibility to you. And it's my job to balance those and make sure that in this claim, you get what you had in your contract. I don't know if expected is the right way to say.
Fair enough, yeah, because you might expect some things that was not realistic or reasonable.
Which then, again, puts my value more on the front side,
right,
in education and making sure you understand what risk you're taking on.
And what you got in.
What protection you have in place.
That makes sense. Okay. Well, anything else on the insurance thing? I know that there's, we could probably talk for hours on it.
Yeah.
We're not, so I don't want to skim over anything, but I don't want to, bore people either, so obviously
no, I think
people can reach out directly to you to get the nuanced conversation.
Without a doubt. From a real estate, I think there is so my conversations with landlords are always fun. With investors are always fun, because they look at it from a business sense, and they want to protect that. They want to, I think in this area especially, we see a caring for tenants, and it's not, I'm not dealing with slumlords that are just, I want to make my money, I don't care. So having those conversations, like when we first talked about HO4s and rental policies for your tenants, you were like, yes, I need to make sure I protect them. I see that all the time. Real estate agents have probably the lowest, I don't want to say EQ. I don't know.
Well, is IQ stand for insurance, Q? I don't know what the Q is in this equation.
So as a real estate agent, they have so much to deal with to get the person from just forget the marketing, from I'm interested to the closing table. That insurance is such a small piece of everything they do. I recommend two things. Either one, get with an agent and learn more about it. Or two, find an agent that you can call anytime and make sure that they're your resource. And I have multiple realtors that I just have, as just a resource. They don't, referral partner, who cares? Call me when you have an issue, because I don't want you to get jammed up. But things like replacement costs and actual cash value, a realtor comes to me and is like, yeah, but this is market value. And I'm like, okay, market value does not translate into the insurance side. And so I think there's a responsibility of realtors to understand better what that insurance product does for their client, and understand that DTI, right, getting to the base level, I can buy this house, using insurance to get there may not be in the best interest of your client.
I concur.
I'm pushing buttons here.
Yeah.
But
I think if you're getting to that point, though, you probably
best.
Shouldn't be there's a serious conversation about whether you should even afford it, or if it's even affordable at that point.
With the buyer, yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that realtors are not having that difficult conversation, and then I have to have the opposite difficult conversation, which is budget and financially, you're buying maybe something just out of your reach, or you're
don't want
pushing the
insurance.
limits of it. I can't protect that, right?
Yeah.
I can't change your budget. I can't make you I can't
Right.
handle your finances better for you. But by cheapening your insurance policy, you're now not letting me protect what it's
You're
my
actually
job to
buying,
protect.
yeah.
And this asset you're buying, which is the home, the dwelling may be covered, but is the liability covered? Is your auto policy and your umbrella there so that if something big does happen, the rest of your assets? So I look at it from a bigger picture. So sometimes that's
Does that happen often?
a lot,
Really?
very often. So
Is that
it is many
Like
times
that-
a week I have DTI conversations with
And-
clients and lenders and realtors.
about your insurance making or breaking the ability for you to buy a house? Like
multiple
that's
times
right?
weekly.
Wow.
So much so that my marketing has changed to, here's what I recommend, here's a good option, here's a value offer that I can offer, but understand that if we're going to have a conversation if you take the value offer. And I have to have that difficult conversation.
That just, Well, I mean, I think it's pretty well known, like what my opinions are on home ownership. I think you have to be really careful. I think that's a perfect example, right? Like, like it makes sense to buy a house sometimes, but it's just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I think that there's really a conversation about like the golden handcuffs. Just because you can afford to buy it, again, doesn't mean you're going to be happy that you did.
Or that you're going to be protected. Your
happens,
spouse or your children or your future earned income is going to be protected in the long run.
Yeah.
If you're not protected correctly.
Ooh, that's crazy. Multiple times a week?
Yeah, multiple times.
Wow.
And every insurance agent is going to say that's a battle we have. The two biggest battles I have with loan officers and realtors are getting under DTI and what is, can I do a RCE, which is a replacement cost estimator, showing, because right now the value of a home being sold and what the bank is protecting is a lot more than what you can rebuild the house for.
Wow, that is.
So those are the two.
Did not know this. Yeah. So how can I ask you a question then? Like looking forward with have you felt the market shift? Do you think it's going to shift? And do you think people are going to be looking at insurance differently with things that have happened this year, where there's been surprises, things that nobody would have predicted, things that were totally out of left field? How do you think that's going to affect people moving forward when they look at insurance and those conversations? And have you noticed any differences yet, or maybe not at all?
I don't think the current pandemic, as much as you're seeing a shift in realtors. And so we had a huge influx over the last 2 years of insurance, of
agents?
Realtor agents in the area. I'm seeing less of I don't want to say unserious because they were probably serious, but it may not even be newer, because I know newer ones that are killing it and take it seriously. It's the ones that were on the fence, like, I don't really make my money this way. Yeah. So I'm seeing them drop off, right? It's changed priorities. And so maybe I need something more stable, right? I can't be hustling around town as much as I was. I can't be networking and out in the, and so I feel like I'm dealing with more professional realtors. And I know that
that's probably a great thing for you, right?
I think it's a great thing, right? Because I'm able to have those more difficult conversations where I've always, in the 7-8 years of my insurance career, I've always had the DTI conversation. Now I'm able to say, why are you having them buy this house if they can't meet DTI? Yeah. Because insurance isn't protecting them. Like, let me do my job. Yeah. And they're like, okay, wow, I never thought of it that way. And when you work with other serious professionals, I can be a serious professional.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, everybody's going to the same goals, like get the client into a house that they love, but it's also, you want them to be happy 2 years from now and not call you and be like, well, what did you do to me?
Well, and landlords are dealing with, rental issues over the last few months.
True. Is there anything for rent protection? Because I think, I can't imagine that this conversation,
Maybe.
Is this not, you don't think any of these carriers are having,
Yes.
I mean, I know we had the conversation, hey, could you have protection for rent loss? And the answer is no, resounding no, unfortunately. Right. But
so there's not an initial peril, right? So
why wouldn't an insurance even if you have a bad tenant who you have to evict, for instance, and you sit on the house for 6 months, by the time you go through eviction court, refix it up, market it, and you rent it, I think a lot of people would be paying for that.
Is that an insurance product, though?
Wouldn't it be your insurance income? I mean, that's no different than
interesting,
like
right?
life insurance or disability insurance or anything, right?
So there is liability insurance for protecting you in that process. So if you do something incorrect, so your policies that we have protect you, some of them. So protect you if you go through the eviction process wrong and you're liable for that mistake.
But what about, I'm not protected if I have just a vacancy.
No.
Right. And that's where.
So there's a difference between what the insurance company is willing to cover and what your business risk is.
Right.
And so there's a risk of the insurance can't cover your tenants not having the income. How do you insure that?
So they can cover my income as the landlord, right?
If there's a covered loss.
Yeah.
So you're not covered for their lack of income. You're not covered for, so if there was a fire and you couldn't use that home, I know your policies have loss of use. So
I'd get covered in that
you'd be
situation.
covered because fire is the peril.
Right. But a bad paying or a non-paying tenant is not peril.
Right.
Interesting. Okay. Well,
just further conversations that everybody should have with their insurance agent.
Yeah, we can have more of these on air then. Before anything else on insurance, because I want to talk about your show a little bit.
Yeah, I know. I think that's.
So how do people get a hold of you about the insurance side specifically? If somebody needs to have these conversations or whatnot, how do they get a hold of you or somebody on your team?
Yeah, allchoiceinsurance.com. /Hendersonville is our Hendersonville office, but you can reach us anywhere. 828-237-2327 is my direct line to my office. You can find me anywhere on social. Hit me up, DM me, message me. I'll respond.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, you could. We have. If you get to our website, there's places where you can set up virtual online meetings. We could set up phone calls. Our new tagline is a safer way to do insurance. So we want to be safe. So we definitely have the capabilities to handle it, whether you want to come to an office or you want to do it online. We can be there for you. Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's talk about your podcast. So what, you're like 4 months in?
Yeah, just about 4 months.
So
now I'm gonna have to reciprocate and have you on.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I always enjoy talking to you, so that'd be a fun conversation. But your podcast is a little bit broader, right? Like you set yours up to go wherever you want it to go.
So I guess the overall focus is community leaders, which tends itself, in my network, has lent itself to economic and business leaders. We've had some healthcare leaders and some Blue Ridge Community College. I've had some education leaders on. But it's pretty broad, where I'm just trying to speak with community leaders about what they're doing and how they're handling things, to try to open up opportunities for other people too that may have dealt with issues that they dealt with or have conversations that they're having now. So it's been a lot of fun.
When was the idea originally born, and how long after that did you take it to fruition and make it happen?
Yeah, so it's probably been 3-4 years that I really wanted to do a podcast. I always felt like it was something I could do. The back end, the editing, the marketing of it was always my holdback. I knew how to market it. I knew what I would want to do with it, the time that it would take. So I use Pro 16 Productions. Shout out to them. Andre over there does all my back end editing. He puts the YouTube video together. He puts the audio together, which takes so much time and lets me focus on what I really want to focus on, which is having these conversations and promoting that in the community. Right. So really, I met Andre and was super impressed. He was about a year into his commercial photography business. For all you realtors out there, reach out to Andre at Pro 16. He does real estate photography too. I'm really boosting him here because he's so good to me. So I met him and it was just super. We both have a restaurant background. He's just a hustler. He really wants to be successful, understood that he needed to be in the community. He's a man of faith, which speaks well to me. And so in our initial coffee, I was like, this is the guy I really want to help out. So I had a couple of contacts in the community, and that we really talked about mentorship with him in our initial conversation. So I dropped a couple names, which is my favorite thing to do. I know it sounds bad, like dropping names, but it's more making that connection. Right. So I dropped a couple connections that I was like, try these people. I don't have one is somebody that I really hadn't talked to in like 8 years, but knew 15 years ago really well. And he called him, and they talked for like an hour about photography.
Right.
And so he came back to my office and was like, I just wanted to thank you. I want to spend a couple minutes just showing you appreciation and seeing if there's anything I do for you. And I was like,
well, there's this project I've been working on. Yeah.
And so I had, I was like, man, I'm going to throw something at you.
Yeah.
Like, you let me know what you think. And he said, listen, man, it's something that as long as it doesn't take away from my business time-wise, I think it'd be beneficial for both of us to work together. And it has. I think it's been great. And I think it's, I tell him, I'm like, listen, I'll introduce you to 50 influential people in the community. And and then you please help me look better than what I would put together.
Make the back end work. Yeah.
And so, it's one of those things where you just find that that portion of it was a weakness that I don't know if I would ever overcome. Right. And having someone be able to come beside me and say, I got you on that, was super beneficial. And it's been, I think, hopefully beneficial to the community, hopefully beneficial in that people find value in the podcast, which is my goal.
So. Right. No doubt. I think you do a great job with it.
Thank you.
So what is the biggest takeaway you think you've gotten from the podcast? Maybe just from a guest that you've had on, or just you yourself going through the process and like having like a new outlet for different things?
Yeah, so that's kind of two different questions. So I guess what I learned from the guests is I've always known community is important, but I've seen how it's important in different ways to different people. So sometimes we're blinded to what we haven't experienced, and being open to, just some downtown merchants that have a merchant, I don't want to say society, but community that they have amongst themselves. And I was like so enthralled with that. And even talking to Andre on my podcast, that there's photographers across the state and across the nation that have their own community. And then how that impacts what you do locally has been amazing. So that's been probably the biggest lesson I learned, is that it's, as much as I thought I understood community and networking, it's bigger and broader and more important than I thought. As far as the actual marketing and podcast, I initially did this as a way to pivot into commercial insurance. Work more with investors, get into real estate bed and breakfast inns. That was my initial goal. The actual benefit has been becoming more connected and more approachable in my community. And to people that I just maybe never would have made a connection with, I now have made a connection with, which has been just special and beneficial to me selfishly. It's I've met attorneys that I would have never been able to walk in their door and got time from them, and now have had multiple conversations with and work with professionally. Community leaders that I never thought there would be an opportunity to work with or that I could professionally help them. I've been able to make those connections, so it's been a
good experience.
It's been a great experience.
Good, man. Well, keep going strong. So where do people find out about your show?
Yeah, so we're on Spotify and all the Apple iTunes, all the major places you can get your podcasts. It's the Jared Bellmund Show, and then we're on YouTube also. So if you go to All Choice Insurance's YouTube channel, there's a whole playlist of the Jared Bellmund Show. So
cool. Awesome, man. Well, any closing thoughts about anything at all? Anything we haven't touched about? It doesn't have to be on topic.
No, man. I think it's great that you're talking personal responsibility. I think it's in this time something that people should be thinking about. I think people are thinking about it more.
Yeah.
And if I can help with any aspect of that, whether it be in business as a business operator, or in insurance as an insurance agent, or as a community member, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm accessible and more than willing to help.
Cool, man. Well, thanks so much for joining the show again. We'll have all your contact information and the links to everything in the show notes, so appreciate it, man.
Thanks for having me, Rodrigo.
All right, y'all. Take care. As always, please leave us a review, share it with your friends. It means a lot to us, and we will see you all in the next one. Take care.